Bom dia, hoje é 4 de agosto de 2026. Meu nome é Breno Altman e estamos dando início a mais uma edição do programa 20 Minutos. Gideon Levy é colunista do diário Haaretz desde 1982 e um dos poucos jornalistas israelenses que dedicou a carreira a contar aos seus compatriotas o que Israel faz aos palestinos em Gaza e na Cisjordânia. Nasceu em Tel Aviv em 1953, filho de refugiados do Holocausto, está proibido de entrar em Gaza desde 2006, o que não o impediu de seguir narrando o cerco ao qual, desde então, esse enclave está submetido, semana após semana. Por isso é chamado de traidor por parte da sociedade de seus pais. Agora ele está no Brasil para lançar o Massacre de Gaza, Relatos de uma Catástrofe, publicado pela editora Elefante. É com ele que hoje vamos conversar. A entrevista ao vivo será em inglês para permitir maior interação do público. Em breve, disponibilizaremos uma versão legendada e dublada em português. Fiquem conosco, já vamos começar. Good morning, Mr. Levy. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation for this interview.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You were born in Tel Aviv in 1953, the son of Czechoslovak refugees who fled the Holocaust. Does your parents' history shape the way you see the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians today?
I would like to believe that yes, but I don't see a direct connection. Because my parents never spoke about the past. And they were really refugees in the way that at least my father never really felt at home in Israel, but not because of political reasons. He was German, from Czechoslovakia, but German, and he didn't find his place there, really. And therefore we didn't speak about those issues at home. It was a small house, not political, and only in retrospective I can think that my father was a refugee. I was never told, I never perceived him as a refugee. Because we saw the whole world in different eyes in those years. I'm speaking with you about the 50s, few years after the Holocaust. Tel Aviv was full with Holocaust survivors. Nobody spoke about it. Everything was secret. It was a very dramatic period, but you can understand it only in retrospect.
Was your education a Zionist education?
Everyone in Tel Aviv or in Israel of those years got a Zionist education. There are very few exceptions, like the children of Meir Vilner, who was the friend of your grandfather, the communist leader of those years, except of those who were totally excluded from Israeli society. There were some different people. Everyone had we got Zionism with the milk of our mothers.
Did you go to the army?
I went to the army without any hesitations. I was recruited to the army radio station. And then I got sick, I was released, I came back, but I made a full service without any doubts. I was a good boy, Tel Aviv. Really a good boy, Tel Aviv.
Did you take part in any of the war against the Arab or Palestinian people?
No, never, because I was a journalist in the army, so I never took a part, but I'm trying to remember, and I do remember what were my thoughts in those years. Nothing to do with what I think today.
Between 1978 and 1982, you served as an aide to Shimon Peres, one of the leading figures in the Labour Party. Did you work as a journalist after that period change your view of the Israeli state and society?
Look, the 4 years with Shimon Peres, which were very, very intensive, 18 hours a day, only the two of us in the car, traveling all over Israel. It was for me a school but not for good things, for bad things. But less ideological and more learning the way politics works. And I can't tell you that I liked it. Those were really tough years for me. Still not because of ideology. Because I realized that, you know, we always say that you don't want to know how sausages are being made. Because if you would know how do we produce sausages, you wouldn't eat it. I saw how the political sausages are being made, and I really was annoyed by it. So this was the main lesson. I was already then with the leftist part of the Labour Party, but it was still deeply Zionist conviction, but from the left.
But when did you begin to change your mind about the Israeli society? Which facts led you to change your mind about Zionism and about your Zionist education?
It was a process. Don't expect me to wake up one morning and say, oh, Zionism means Jewish supremacy, I cannot support it anymore. Finished. No. It was a long process which started with incidental travels to the occupied territories. I remember the day when I was already with Haaretz as a journalist, and a friend of mine, member of Meretz of a leftist party in the parliament, called me and told me, listen, there is some Arab woman, Palestinian woman in the West Bank who lost her olive trees because settlers or soldiers cut it. Let's go and meet her.
When was it?
This was in the late 80s. And we went together, and I wrote a story about the woman who lost her olive trees. And a few weeks later, I said, why wouldn't I go again to make some stories about the West Bank? And gradually, I realized two things. First of all, that the real thing which really defines Israel is in the occupation, in the occupied territories. This defines Israel, not all our achievements. All our achievements are wonderful, but the backyard, the dark backyard of Israel defines Israel. I always compare it to a man who beats at night his wife. He might be lovely, charming, everyone likes him. Once he does this defines him. From now on, he's a violent man. And no matter how he deals with other issues and other people, this defines him. And the occupation defines Israel. So I realized slowly, gradually, that the occupation defines Israel, and there is almost no Israeli journalist to cover it. Because at this time there were still 2, 3, 4 journalists who wrote at all about the crimes of the occupation. And then gradually I decided I will dedicate my career to cover the occupation. And then gradually my views changed again in a long process. Releasing yourself from Zionism is, as an Israeli, quite a painful and long process, because it's unheard of in Israel. In Israel, you can't be not Zionist. You couldn't be a non-communist in Soviet Russia, and you can't be a non-Zionist in Israel. I mean, it doesn't go for people. You know, when I tell people that I separated myself from Zionism, they say, maybe you should meet a psychiatrist. Maybe he can help you. I mean, people see
like it was a clinical problem.
Absolutely. If they don't see a possibility for this, because if you are not a Zionist, what are you doing there? So it's a long process, but it went very systematically until the more the crimes became more violent and the crimes became, look, I'm 45 years now covering at least once a week crimes of the occupation. Every week I travel first to Gaza and now only to the West Bank, unfortunately. What I saw, if more Israelis would have seen it, I'm sure they would share my views, because you cannot remain Zionist after what I've seen.
You have said many times in other interviews that you receive threats and is treated as a traitor by part of the Israeli society. My question, is there another part of the Israeli Jews willing to listen to you and to rethink their positions?
There is, but we can all meet in a smaller studio than this. I have no illusions. No, there is not, and especially not, I guess we'll get to it later, especially not after the 7th of October. 7th of October changed everything in Israel. There are very, very few people who are still ready to listen. Therefore, I feel so lonely, especially after the 7th of October. But I must mention one thing. I gain still full freedom in my newspaper and in Israel. I write, yes, I'm banned on Israeli TV ever since the 7th of October. They don't invite me anymore. Okay. But in Haaretz, I can write whatever I want, total freedom. Nobody tried to stop me, not within the newspaper, not outside the newspaper, not from the government, not from the secret services. I have my freedom because I'm privileged, because I'm Jewish, and because I'm privileged because I work for a platform like Haaretz. I have no illusions about the future. It will not stay like this forever if this government will continue. But from the time being, I'm really not the story. I'm also less threatened now. In 2014, I had bodyguards. Today, I feel very safe.
Do you identify yourself as a Zionist, a non-Zionist, or anti-Zionist?
Today, I easily can answer you that I am a non-Zionist from the moment that I realized that Zionism means Jewish supremacy. And the moment there is a national supremacy as part of an ideology, I cannot be part of it. And therefore, I cannot be part of Zionism. Maybe becoming anti-Zionist would really require me to leave Israel. I have no plans to leave Israel. That's my place. I feel very attached to Israel. I was born there. I'll die there. I'm very attached to people, to smells, to the language, obviously, to the memories, to many, many things. Deeply ashamed, deeply full of guilt feelings toward the Palestinians, but still it is my place. And as long as it is my place, I cannot define myself as anti-Zionist because then go away. My wife is Swedish. I could easily move to Sweden, for example. I will never do it. So no, I'm not Zionist anymore. And I fight against certain things in Zionism, but I'm still an Israeli.
Do you have children?
Yes.
Are they Zionist or non-Zionist?
They are Zionists. They are exactly like I was in their age.
And what they think? Do they think about their father? Their political, your political positions.
First of all, we are almost not talking about politics at home. We love each other like hell, as you can imagine yourself. There were years in which they paid some price because for them it was many times they were attacked by their friends. Oh, your father, the traitor, your father, the Hamas-loving Israeli, and so on. But by and large, it didn't penetrate into our family life. We keep the family life as it is. They vote, I think, I don't even know for whom they vote, but they vote for Zionist leftist parties, but they didn't go all the way that I did. And as I said, when I was in their age, I didn't do this way either.
Are you a religious Jew?
Not at all. I'm secular. I was born secular, and here I didn't change at all. My father, when he came to Israel, I always joke on it, he didn't know the difference between Purim and Yom Kippurim. And he always asked me, when do we wear costumes, in Purim or in Kippurim? He was really so far from religion, and I'm the same.
Do you believe a left-wing Zionism is possible?
No. No, you have to choose. Israelis have to choose between being democratic or being a Jewish state. They cannot have both. And the leftist Zionists believe that it can go together. And they are cheating themselves and cheating the others because it doesn't go together. If you are a Democrat, if you are a Democrat, it cannot be a Jewish state because we are half and half between the river and the sea. How can you be a Democrat and claim this is the supremacy? Yeah? And if you want a Jewish state, it cannot be democratic because then you ignore half of the population between the river and the sea. So you have to make your choice. You can't be Zionist and liberal, because Zionism means supremacy of one people over the other. And if any ideology goes for supremacy, it cannot be a liberal ideology.
Is Netanyahu a turning point in Zionism history, or what happened right now is just a confirmation of the nature itself of Zionism?
Both. Netanyahu didn't start anything, not the occupation, not the settlements, not the attitude toward the Palestinians, not the apartheid, not the racism, not the nationalism. He didn't start it. But him and his partners brought it to extreme places where we have never been before. Because Netanyahu is going now with partners who, at least some of them, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others, would be defined in any liberal country in the world as neo-Nazis and wouldn't be able to run. In Europe, none of them could have been a legitimate lawmaker. No way. And he legitimized them. So Netanyahu took the Zionist ideology and mainly the occupation and brought it to more brutal places, but he didn't start anything. And more than this, after Netanyahu will be gone, and I believe he will be gone very soon, Israel will not release itself from all those crimes, because you hear what the others are offering. None of them, of all the opposition parties, the Jewish ones, none of them was against the war in Gaza. None of them was against the war in Iran. None of them was against the war in Lebanon. None of them is even in favor for the two-state solution, God forbid, a solution which, maybe we'll talk about it later, is not relevant anymore. But in any case, there will be very little difference. It will be better without Netanyahu, no doubt. Netanyahu will be remembered as someone who destroyed many things in Israel. Many, many things this man destroyed. The international position of Israel, the political structure, the legal system. He destroyed a lot, but he didn't start anything.
Your book, The Killing of Gaza, translated to Brazil as O Massacre de Gaza, opens with your mourning of October 7th, 2023, when you compared the fall of the Gaza fence to the Berlin Wall, before you learned of the massacre in southern Israel. How do you reconstruct those first hours today and the turn that came afterward?
Exactly as it was. The first, look, I was jogging in the park Saturday morning. I heard a siren, out of the blue, a siren. I was sure it's a technical error. 5 minutes later, another siren. Then I understood something is going on. I rushed home. At home, already people were showing videos of those pickup trucks moving in the streets of Sderot with armed Palestinians. I was sure this was a fake video and it's the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, because they looked like this. I couldn't believe that this is possible at all. And then I started to see many people crossing the barrier, the fences between Gaza and Israel. And yes, I admit, for a moment, which I regret because I didn't know what's going on, for a moment it looked to me like the happiness of the Germans destroying and crossing the Berlin Wall. The same happiness, the same emotions. Then came the information about what is really going on. And the next day I went there and I saw horrible scenes in all the kibbutzim, really, with blood and bodies, and I can't even describe what I saw. And then I realized that I was very, very wrong. If it wouldn't end with this violence, I would even be happy about breaking the fence of Gaza. Sure, this was something that should have happened and should happen today, breaking all those terrible fences that Israel surrounded itself from all its directions, fences and fences and fences. and fences. Instead of trying to create a new reality with our neighbors, it's just getting into ourselves and surrounding ourselves with endless fences, which are also not effective, because we saw it on the 7th of October. You know how much money they spend on this barrier? It was a barrier which has in no other place in the world, under the ground, above the ground, all kind of technological devices. I mean, every bird that crossed the fence was immediately monitored, and it didn't help. But the first hours were hours of illusion, of thinking that something good is happening. I was totally wrong.
You describe October 7th as the result of Israeli arrogance, the idea that it was possible to keep 2 million people caged in Gaza without ever paying for it. When does the arrogance begin?
No, the arrogance begins, if you want, in 48, but much more than this. The big arrogance of Israel began on June 67, when in 1 week Israel could beat all the Israeli armies, the Arab armies, and conquer so many lands, from Egypt, from Jordan, from Syria.
During the 6 Days War.
During the 6 Day War. This made us arrogant like never before. We can do whatever we want. We have the best army. We are the most clever people. We are the chosen people. And all those symptoms, which became much worse later on. Then came the 73 war, the Yom Kippur War. And for a moment, we became a little bit more modest, because we understood that our capabilities are not unlimited. But soon after 73, we got back to this arrogance, which accompany us ever since then. Any average Israeli is totally convinced not only that we are the chosen people, not only that the international law doesn't apply about Israel because we are a special case, but we really think that we know better than any other people in the world. Look how they behave in many cases when they go after the army to those trips abroad to South America or to Asia, to Far East Asia. Everywhere they go, they say, look at us, we can teach you everything. Nobody can tell us what to do. And that's the DNA of Israel. It's a very arrogant DNA. And the 7th of October was a dramatic failure of this arrogance. Even what do you mean? What do I mean when I say I saw those videos and I couldn't believe that those videos are real? Part of this arrogance. It's impossible that Palestinians from Gaza will be able to break this barrier and come into Israel, because it cannot be. We are so strong. How dare they? So and the arrogance, by the way, is until this very moment. Nothing changed.
Do you think the Netanyahu's government was surprised by October 7th, or in any form this government was able to manipulate the October 7th and even having informations before it happened?
I don't buy all those conspiracies. I don't think they, for sure not for such a demonstration of power, of devotion. I mean, thousands of people penetrating into Israel, and for the first hours, no army, nothing, no air force, nothing. The strongest army in the world, totally paralyzed. I don't buy all those conspiracies. I truly believe that it was a fiasco, and the fiasco was made by our arrogance, but the fiasco was not something that anyone expected.
Is Hamas, in your opinion, a terrorist organization?
As you can imagine yourself, I hate those questions usually asked by right-wingers, not by people like you, because it's always this test. Now let's see if you pass the test or not. If you say they are a terrorist organization, so you'll be kosher for Israel. But if you dare to say they are not, so finished. You are doomed to be. My best answer can be that Hamas is a terrorist organization, but Israel is a terrorist state in much, much bigger scale. Both are really killing and destroying civilian targets, Israel on a total different scale, and both are committing terror. To throw a bomb over a refugee camp in Gaza is terror, and to explode yourself in a bus in Tel Aviv is terror. Both organizations committed, and both are terrorists, yeah.
Do you think that October 7th was an inevitable reaction from the Palestinian people and resistance?
Anyone who thought that, and this I write here, as you mentioned, anyone who thought that the Palestinians will sit for generations and accept those unhuman and unbelievable conditions that they are put in, the humiliation, the killings, you have visited there, but people who never visited the occupied territories have no clue what does it mean to live under the Israeli occupation. Most of the Israelis have no clue what does it mean. If you think that this can last forever, you know nothing about the nature of human beings, and you know nothing about history. Because history taught us again and again that there will always be a resistance, and the more brutal the occupation is, the more brutal will be the resistance. That's the way it goes. So to be surprised, I was surprised that for so many years it didn't happen.
Is it possible to compare October 7th with Warsaw Uprising in 1944?
First of all, it's possible because in both cases it was a people who was fighting many times in horrible means for its freedom. But the context was different. You can ask another question. Can you compare between the 7th of October and the Holocaust, and between Hamas and the Nazis, as many Israelis do? And this is unacceptable from my point of view. You know, Israelis now always say this is the second catastrophe which happened to the Jewish people after the Holocaust. By saying this, you compare both. How dare you to compare 2,500 Jews killed, horrible, horrible event, to 6 million people? I mean, how dare you to say it? So all those comparisons are just a provocation. They mean nothing. It was a horrible event, the 7th of October. It had a context like the General Secretary of the UN said immediately after it, and he was perceived in Israel, described as a Nazi almost, sure as an anti-Semite. Sure it has a context. Sure they had many reasons to do anything possible, and I say anything possible means anything possible to get released from this brutal, barbaric occupation. Did what they have done, was it moral? No, it wasn't moral, it was criminal. But so is the occupation.
In the book, you write that the Israeli press traded journalism for propaganda and put on a military uniform. Was there coercion from the government, or was it a decision of its own?
I wish it was because pressure of the government. I wish it was because the regime in Israel, because the secret services, because the army, because the government is forcing us not to tell the truth and not to tell the full truth. I wish it would have been like this. Unfortunately, it's totally wrong. The Israeli media in the last 3 years is in its most shameful situation ever. It was never very courageous, but what happened in the last 3 years, I can assure you that any Brazilian in the smallest villages in Brazil saw more images from Gaza than any Israeli who lives 1.5 hour drive from Gaza. The Israelis saw nothing, and they didn't see nothing, not because the government told the media not to do it, because the media is coward, because the media knows that the viewers and the readership don't want to see it. So why to bother them? Let's please them and not show them. And the role of the media, I think historians will still realize how dramatic and how damageful was the not only of the war, but also of the occupation, the coverage of the Israeli media, how criminal it is, because they were shaping the public opinion. They believe that they should do whatever is expected from them, from their viewers and readers. They don't see they have a role in a democracy, no matter what the reader wants to see or doesn't want to see. We have to tell the full truth, and they never did it when it comes to the occupation. And don't blame the government for this. You should blame the Israeli media.
Was the Haaretz the only exception?
There are some more. It will be unfair, but the Haaretz is the only really well-established exception. And by far from all the others, it's not that the others are a little bit less good. No. There is a Haaretz and all the rest. Next to Haaretz, there are some online outlets which did also a very good job, but they are very few and very small. But the mainstream media was all in the same language. You couldn't see on Israeli TV for 3 years one voice which objects the war. One person who will come and say the whole idea of punishing Gaza in such a barbaric way is a wrong idea. This simple sentence was not heard in Israel for 3 years. And you want to call Israel a democracy? It's ridiculous.
Was Haaretz punished by the government?
Yes, Haaretz was punished and is punished by the government by stopping all the advertisements, the governmental advertisements, and stopping all the subscriptions on Haaretz from all the governmental agencies, which is a hell of a price. But until now, Haaretz survives, but it's not easy.
You recount that respected generals publicly proposed spreading disease in Gaza or starving the population, and that the reaction was indifference. Is the massacre of the Palestinians, no matter what is done, accepted by the majority of Israeli Jews?
It's more than accepted. For many of them, I don't know how many, it is a positive behavior, a positive outcome. Most of the Israelis believe that after the 7th of October, we have the right to do whatever we want. Most of the Israelis believe that after the crimes of the 7th of October, there are no limits for Israel. And most of the Israelis believe that there are no innocent people in Gaza. And if there are no innocent people, and maybe even not people, but something else, then we have the right to do, and most of the people have no problem, not most. I would say 90% of the Israelis at least have no problem with what we're doing in Gaza. No problem. No moral question marks. Nothing.
As many German people said 10 or 20 years after the Second World War, the Israeli society would be able to say in 10 or 20 years, we didn't know what was happening?
I hope so, but I don't see it happening. No.
They know what's happening.
They know, they know through the filters of the media.
It's not possible to say, as many German people said, I didn't know that there was concentration camp. I didn't know that there was the Holocaust. I didn't know there was extermination camps. Is it possible to say this about what's happening in the Palestinian territories in 10 or 20 years?
Yes and no. Because if you deny all those things, it's not that Israelis didn't hear about it. Sure they did. It's not that the Israelis didn't watch here and there some images from what's going on, but they were in total denial. You say genocide in Israel and you become not legitimate, because for almost all Israelis it's not a genocide. And they will tell you all kinds of excuses why it's not a genocide. When an Israeli pilot kills 10, 20 children, immediately there is a justification, immediately, automatically and blindly. Every Israeli will tell you, A, maybe it's not true. B, if it's true, there was a terrorist there and there was no other choice. So when you surround yourself with all those walls of denial, of protecting yourself, then the question is if you knew or not becomes irrelevant. Because even if you know, you have your own justification to everything that happens. And I don't see that in 10, 20 or 30 years, the Israeli society will wake up and say, oh, we were so wrong, it was so terrible. It doesn't go to this direction. On the contrary, you see that the zeitgeist, the spirit of these times goes to the opposite direction, for more racism, more nationalism, and more barbarism. You see it in any poll. Israel is going just to the opposite direction.
In one of the chapters of your book, you put a direct question to the court and to yourself. If what is happening in Gaza is not genocide, then what is it? How would you answer that question today?
Same like then. Look, they always claim that the difference between mass killing and genocide is by the intents. Did you have an intention? But now we know there was an intention, but because you hear the plans of the government, not from me, from the government spokespersons, from the ministers. They wanted to push the whole population to the south. They decided to destroy the entire Gaza Strip systematically. Nobody claims anymore that if you you destroy a whole neighborhood, it is because 3 terrorists were hiding there. No. The destruction of Gaza was planned and systematically committed. And same for pushing all the people of Gaza to the south and putting them in big cages in those the concentration camps. This is planned, this is systematic. And then the mass killing was systematic, it's very clear. When you destroy all the hospitals, all the schools, all the shelters, all the governmental offices, all the social help networks, you destroy everything. You want to destroy the society. And what Israel wanted is to destroy the Palestinian society. They knew they cannot kill 2 million people, but they can destroy them as a society, leave them without any institutions, any functioning institution, put them like animals, and even animals don't deserve it, in those concentration camps, supply them with some food, and that's it. And this can be called only a genocide. There is
a planned genocide.
Definitely systematic and planned and declared so. It's not me saying it. Listen to what the Minister of Defense, Netanyahu is more careful about it, but his ministers and members of his party listen to what they say. And they speak now the same about Lebanon. The other day, the Minister of Defense of Israel was proud to tell that the army destroyed 24 villages in southern Lebanon, very old villages, he said very proudly. 24 villages, total destruction. This is a crime of war. In a normal country, he should have been arrested in the same evening. He said it, the Minister of Defense, not me.
The Netanyahu government argues that it acted proportionally and only against military targets, treating the death of civilians as collateral damage, as in any war. Are you convinced, for instance, that the killing of women and children in Gaza was intentional and planned?
Look, what was intentional and planned was to kill as many people in Gaza and to destroy as much as you can. This was for sure intentional. Now, if you kill 1,000 babies less than 1 year, if you kill 20,000 children, if you kill 200 journalists, more than in any other war, you cannot claim that it's all without intention. You know, here and there might be accidents, but look at the figures. Those figures speak for themselves. It's almost insulting to even ask, can it be that it wasn't planned? What do you mean it wasn't planned? everyone knows that in Gaza there are 2 million people. If you bomb a neighborhood, you kill all the people in the neighborhood. What did you think? I mean, what did you plan? To put a bomb on a neighborhood and to destroy the whole neighborhood and to call it defensive war, to call it self-defense? I mean, people are not so stupid.
Why so many journalists were killed in Gaza, more than in any war in history?
I don't think it's about the journalists. I think it's part of the total killing. I don't think that it was specifically journalists. But nobody cares that they are journalists, like nobody cares that they are doctors, like nobody cares that they are AIDS workers. Everyone was sent to death by Israel.
Is the press, the Israeli press, allowed to go to Gaza to cover the war?
Not only not the war, but also anything except of the war. For the last 20 years, no Israeli journalist went to Gaza. 20 years. And you know what? The Israeli media couldn't care less. You don't see any except of Haaretz, who appealed to the Supreme Court, that they don't care that they don't go. They get what they want from the army spokesperson, and they don't have any interest in the truth. For them, it's enough. If the army spokesperson says something, that's the truth. Why to bother and to go there? It's not very pleasant to see it. So for sure they can't go. But more than this, also the international media that can't go now for 3 years. And even they don't push hard enough, and the governments don't push hard enough on Israel. What do you mean you don't let media into Gaza for 3 years? You claim that there are no crimes there, so why not to show it?
You are telling me that Haaretz went to the Supreme Court, and what did the Supreme Court answer to Haaretz?
So it's not the Supreme Court, it's also, by the way, the Association of the Foreign Journalists. The Supreme Court asked from the state to give an explanation why can't they go, and the state answer was something like, we are working on it now, and very soon we will enable some journalists into Gaza. And another year passes, and again, and the state says we need more time, and nobody cares.
In February 2024, President Lula compared the Israeli government methods against the Palestinian people to Nazi practice during the Jewish Holocaust. Over that statement, the Netanyahu government declared President Lula, persona non grata. In your view, who is right in that dispute?
If Lula would have asked me, and I'm a great admirer of Lula, if he would have asked me, I would tell him that putting aside the comparison to the Nazis will be more effective. It's even not a factual question now. It's what is more effective. Look, the Nazi phenomena was what it was, and for sure what Israel is doing in the Gaza war and in other places, what Israel is doing within Israel in the last years, all reminds us of at least the early 30s. And yes, Israel didn't build concentration camps. Yes, sure, but not extermination camps.
No gas
Auschwitz.
camera.
So what Lula says enables to Israel to answer, look at us, we are so good, there is no Auschwitz. We didn't use crematoriums. This is...
Or gas chambers.
Or gas chambers, yeah. So I would really think that what Israel is doing is horrible, horrible, horrible. Part of it is totally comparable to what the Germans do. Part of it is uncomparable. But why do we need a comparison to the Holocaust? It's terrible and horrible and barbaric enough also without this comparison. On the contrary, when you compare it, you let the Israelis show how human they are, because there is no Auschwitz in Gaza.
Struck by the brutality of the occupation against the Palestinians, the Israeli intellectual Yeshayahu Leibovich coined the term Judeo-Nazi, Nazi-Judeo, in the 80s to name the political creature he believed was emerging in the country. Do you consider this term apt?
Look, Yeshayahu Leibovich was a real prophet, but a real prophet. Because You speak about the 80s. But in September or in July 67, he warned us already from the outcome of the big success, so to say, of the Six-Day War. He was the first one to say that Israel will turn into a Shabak state, into a state of the secret services. And this definitely happened in many ways. Everything he has foreseen was right. Judo-Nazis can be easily applied about parts of Israeli society, sure. When you see all those Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and their supporters, people who celebrate killing of children, people who celebrate, I'm not sure even if the Nazis celebrated mass killing of children. They celebrated. They call for more. Those part of the Israeli society, almost not I hope it's not the majority, but for sure not the entire society. But those parts are Nazis, sure.
Do you think that it's happening a kind of Nazification of the Israeli society under Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir?
No, I think it's more a fascization.
Fascization.
Yeah, I would rather use the fascization because this is what it is for the time being. Maybe it will get worse. It can get worse. But right now we are really fascization ourselves in many views, not only with the occupation, also what is happening within Israel. Also domestic processes are moving toward fascism, sure.
Part of your book, deals with the West Bank, where you document near daily settler pogroms carried out with the complicity of the FDI. Why do you insist that the fates of Gaza and the West Bank have become intertwined once again?
Very simple, because Israel can. Because there is no one at this time to stop Israel. Because ever since the 7th of October, nobody stops Israel from within, and nobody stops Israel from the outside. The Americans are supporting everything Israel is doing, supplying weapons, financing, everything. Israel feels that it can do it. And the second explanation is that it's the same army. And you cannot take an army who kills 20,000 children in Gaza and then you send them to the West Bank and tell them, no, here there are different rules of the game. If they have some kind of codes, it's the same codes for boys. And we see that soldiers who come from Gaza or soldiers who envy their friends who are in Gaza start to copy behaviors from Gaza into the West Bank, still not in the same scale because there is no Air Force in the West Bank, which makes a big difference. No Air Force, no drones, so it's still a smaller scale. But the logic is the same. Look, they are evacuating now one refugee camp after the other in the West Bank. 3 refugee camps were already destroyed and evacuated. That's exactly what they did in Gaza, and they want to continue now. That's exactly, what do you expect? That the army will say, no, in the West Bank, we will be so human. The Salvation Army will become the Salvation Army. No, it's the same army, the same mindset.
Which is Netanyahu's great plan? Where does he intend to arrive, in your opinion?
Look, there are dreams and there is a practice. And it's not Netanyahu, it's the right-wingers, not only Netanyahu. The dream is really to have total ethnic cleansing between the sea and the river, between the river and the sea. There is room, it's either them or us, and we prefer us. There is room only for one people between the river and the sea. Many people still believe it is possible to get to this point by many methods. Others, Netanyahu, for example, I believe is more realistic. He knows it will not happen, for sure not in his lifetime. But he does anything possible to promote it. For example, he is not ready to any compromise, even not to negotiations with the Palestinians. Take Gaza. No to Hamas, okay. No to the PA in Gaza, okay. No to an international solution for Gaza, also. So what do you want? He wants what I described before, to push them all into concentration camps, to destroy the society, and then it will be easier to push them out. For sure, this is the plan, but Netanyahu is clever enough to understand that most probably this will never be achieved, because there is no country in the world who will be ready to absorb, to accept 2 million refugees. Who will accept it?
The great Israel, the biblical Israel, is the ultimate dream of the right-wing in Israel?
First of all, why to go to the right wing? Let's talk about the American ambassador to Israel, Michael Huckabee. That's his dream, and he says so, and he is the official ambassador of the United States in Israel. He is not a talkbackist or some lunatic evangelist priest. He is the ambassador of the United States in Israel, and he spoke about it very clearly from Iraq and Syria until the Nile. All this should be part of Israel. That's his dream. I don't think that in Israel, there are some lunatics who dream about this, but I think the majority, they will be very happy about ethnic cleansing between the river and the sea.
Is Israel an apartheid regime or the only democracy in Middle East?
I think you know, I think you know the answer, and I think there is only one answer, and I think you know my answer. Look, if it looks like apartheid, if it behaves like apartheid, if it talks like apartheid, it is apartheid. Come with me, or anyone. I'm inviting all your listeners and viewers to come with me for one day to the West Bank, and I'll show them community next to community. One community living with all the resources, with all the rights, and next to it there is a community who is much older there, who has no human rights, no civil rights, no resources, no water, no electricity, no freedom, nothing. Next one to the next. We are going to elections of the 27th of October. One community will be able to participate in the elections, and the very next neighborhood does not have this right. How else can you call it if not apartheid? I'm ready to hear. You know, I used to host activists from South Africa, anti-apartheid fighters who came to Israel throughout the years. And they always told me, you know, it's much worse than our apartheid.
Do you think it's possible to compare Israel to South Africa during the apartheid times?
It's impossible not to compare it. How can you not compare it? There are differences, obviously. First of all, in South Africa, it was 9% ruling 91% of the population. In Israel, it's half of the population is ruling another half. I don't know what does it mean, but that's a difference. There's much more bloodshed in Israel than in South Africa. Israel killed so many more Palestinians than the white ones killed the black community. The white ones also claim they are democratic, and they had elections and everything, but only for the whites. Same in Israel, only for the Jews. I mean, it's such an anachronistic question. The year is 2026, and to still have doubts that Israel is not an apartheid state? How? To declare that Israel is a democracy? How can you be a democracy if in your backyard there's one of the most brutal regimes in the world? How does it go together? I mean, how dare you to call it a democracy? Yes, it is a democracy for its Jewish citizens, no doubt, and I'm the best proof. But to call it a democracy...
For all Jews?
For all Jews, yeah. It is a democracy with problems. Also, the democracy in Brazil is very problematic, and there is no equality in your country. And the United States, it's not equal. None of them is a pure democracy. But you can call it a democracy for all the Jewish citizens, absolutely.
The Zionist leaders argued that, the Palestinians in the occupied territory are not Israeli people, and they show as a proof of democracy that the Arab Israeli population is plenty of rights, would have the same rights than the Jewish population of Israel. Is it true?
It is far off true. First of all, what do you mean the Palestinians in the West Bank have no rights. Do you know one people in the world without citizenship? Give me an example of one people in the world, you know, they don't have any citizenship of any state. So you cannot just say, okay, the 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, maybe it's a problem, but let's speak now about the better side. Irrelevant. If there are 5 million people without citizenship, you are not a democracy, period. And you are apartheid, period. Talking about the Israeli Palestinians, their situation is better than the black community in South Africa, yes, but so what? So what? You see, it's always those things that we think that if it's not Auschwitz, so it's okay. If it's not all the Palestinians without rights, so it is okay. No, it's not okay. And as about the Israeli Palestinians, they have formally equal rights, but only formally. They are discriminated in any possible field of life, from education to economy to their rights, to their freedoms, everything. They are discriminated, but formally they are equal.
Are there discrimination laws against this Arab Palestinian population in Israel?
The nation law, the new law that this government had legislated, is a discriminating law which says very clearly that Israel is a Jewish state. If you say that Israel is a Jewish state, it means the Arabs will be discriminated. If their language, for example, is not recognized as an official language. You know, in Finland, there is a minority of 8% of Swedes. You know that every street sign in Finland must be in both languages.
I can't understand both.
Okay. They are very
It's
very
impossible
different.
to understand both.
And by the way, they are very different one of the other, and the Finns cannot understand the Swedes, and the Swedes not the Finns, because...
Even Finland is not named Finland in Finnish.
Right. And their language is much more close to Hungarian than to Swedish. But in any case, they are happy peoples, and they know something about human rights and equality. And in Israel, 20% of the population is deeply discriminated in all fields of life. I can give you now a whole lecture. There were so many researches about it. Nothing but equality. Yes, formally they can vote. So
what does Arab Palestinian population in Israel learn about the Nakba at their school?
They are not allowed to even mention the Nakba. Until recent years, they couldn't even commemorate the Nakba. You know, we spoke in the beginning of our conversation about my early childhood. I never heard the word Nakba until I was 20 or 25. Nobody dares to. I had no idea. I saw all the ruins along the streets in Tel Aviv, in Israel. I saw those ruins. I never asked, where are the owners of those houses? Where are they? I saw all the forests that Israel had planted over the ruins, to cover the ruins all over Israel. And I never asked, how come that between the trees there are so many ruins? Who are those people? Where are they? I had no clue. Nobody told us. And the Arab community must study all the Zionist thinkers, all the Zionist poets, and almost nothing about their own heritage. Sure.
You keep saying that between Netanyahu and his main rivals, there are only 50 shades of the right, and that the Israeli left and peace movement have been all but wiped out. This October, there will be elections in Israel. What is at stake, and what could change in the country depending on the result?
Very little, but I wouldn't underestimate it. The question is, what are your expectations? If you expect to have a government that will put an end to the occupation, forget about it. If you expect a government which will stop the wars in Iran, in Lebanon, in Gaza, you can forget about it. If you expect a government which will start to dismantle the settlements, you can forget about it. Maybe they will stop a little bit the violence of the settlers, which is quite a lot, but not enough. So we can expect a better government, but for the core issues that we were discussing here in the last hour, there will be no major change. And they admit it. It's not like I say it. They say it. We don't know. We have no plan. We don't mean to deal now with the occupation in the coming years because there are so many more important things. And above all, they don't have the courage to take big decisions. None of them.
They have the exact same position, both these people who are in opposition to Netanyahu and Netanyahu, about the Palestinian.
Did you hear anyone? Did you hear anyone criticizing the government for the genocide from the opposition? Any one of them, of the Jewish opposition? Did anyone?
Even the former Labour Party and the former.
Tell
Haaretz?
me who said so. I never heard. Maybe you have better sources than me. I didn't hear any one of them fighting against it, saying anything critical about the genocide, saying anything critical. 2 weeks ago there was the best example. 2 weeks ago there was another pogrom in one of the villages, and 2 Israelis were killed in this pogrom and 4 Palestinians in a village, and it was a pure pogrom. No question mark about the facts. All the opposition leaders sent condolences to the families of the 2 Jewish victims, while the real victims were 4 innocent peasants, farmers, Palestinians. They didn't mention them at all. So this is the left. This is not Netanyahu. What's the difference when you look at the announcement, the communique that Netanyahu published after this event, and Yair Golan, who is the most leftist of all of them? It's word by word the same text. What's the difference?
For all Zionist parties, Oslo is dead?
No, but they don't admit it. No. They might still stick to it. No. With Oslo, the Democrats and maybe also others, Eisenkot, might still stick to it, but practically Oslo is dead on the ground. And if it's dead, you cannot revive it. I mean, it's a dead body. There is no green line. There is nothing of the Oslo conditions were fulfilled. It had to bring to a permanent solution after 5 years. We are almost 25 years after it, and nothing is even in the horizon. So Oslo is only good for Israelis to say there is Area A and Area B and Area C, but in all of them, the army does whatever it wants.
Do you think that Rabin and Peres were really committed to the Oslo agreements in terms of walking in the direction of a 2-state solution?
Yes, but not enough. None of them was ready for a full Palestinian state. None of them, and they said so. And without realizing that the Palestinians deserve a state, all the rest is tactics. Yes, they believe they can improve the occupation. They wanted to improve the occupation, to make it more liberal, to make it more human, but it doesn't work because an occupation by its definition cannot be human and cannot be liberal. And they believed it can be, and they misled themselves and misled the whole people, because finally they were not ready to stop the settlements. If you are not ready to stop the settlements, you mean to stay there. If you mean to stay there, there is no Palestinian state. And this was their mindset.
In the afterword of the Brazilian edition of your book, written in January 1st, 2026, you called Trump a friend of genocide and described the October 2025 ceasefire as a unilateral truce that benefited only Israel. What has changed? What has changed and what has not for the Palestinians since that agreement?
Unfortunately, nothing changed. I'm talking to my friends in those concentration camps, and they live in the same conditions. On tents in this terrible heat of 35, 40 degrees, without electricity, without flowing water, nothing changed. And Donald Trump, with what weapons did the Israelis bomb Gaza? With American jets, with American bombs, with American money. So you cannot say that Donald Trump is not behind the genocide. If Donald Trump, and before Joe Biden, let's not clean Joe Biden. It started in his time. The Gaza war started not under Trump, under Biden. He supported it blindly, and you cannot now say, no, I'm against it. What do you mean against? You could stop it in one phone call. You tell the Israelis that you don't get more supply, and Israel has to stop.
Do you think that the Israeli government is not going to deoccupying Gaza in any way?
No, unless it will be forced. But I don't see anyone forcing them.
On July 6th, Hamas announced the dissolution of its government in Gaza in order to hand over the administration to a technocratic committee. It also accepted a commitment to disarm, conditioned on the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the region. How do you assess these moves?
Unfortunately, without any real meaning, totally meaningless. Because the Hamas will claim that they will not disarm themselves as long as Israel does not withdraw, and Israel will say, we don't withdraw until you will not disarm. And disarming is something very fishy. What does it mean, disarm? And I'm ready even to ask, why to disarm? Does Israel disarm itself? Who is going to protect them if they disarm? But let's put this aside. It's all about pleasing the Americans right now, and this cannot lead to an agreement. There is not a real goodwill, first of all, by Israel, and maybe also by Hamas. There is not a real will to get to an agreement. Both sides don't want an agreement. For sure not a peace agreement. Both sides don't want equally. And if both sides don't want peace, there will be no peace.
Which is the repercussion on Israel of the war against Iran? What has changed with this war against Iran?
Look, this was the claim to fame of Netanyahu for the last 20, 30 years. This is his life project. He's trying to push the United States into war in Iran year after year, administration after administration, and he failed until he found Donald Trump, who now regrets it, obviously. I think that the agreement with Iran was the best guarantee for Israel's security and for stability. Came Netanyahu and convinced, God knows why, Barack Obama to cancel this agreement, and then Donald Trump, obviously. And Barack Obama didn't, but Donald Trump did. And the moment this agreement was violated, there is no better thing. And all this war is for nothing, but really for nothing. What did we gain? Is Israel a more secure place today than before bombarding Iran? We know that not. Is Israel more accepted in the world? We know that not. Is Iran weaker today? No, they are much stronger today. Look how they behaved toward the Americans. With what arrogance they stand there and just ignore the so-called strongest politician in the world, Donald Trump. Just ignore him. So nothing good came out of it, and I think the Americans understand it. Unfortunately, the Israelis still stick to the belief that the war is the only way to solve problems, but the war should be the last way, not the first one. And for Israel today, war is not only the first option, it's the only option. And this is sick.
Was Israel affected by Iranian attacks during the war?
Sure.
How
very
much?
affected. First of all, psychologically, economically. Go to Israel. It has many reasons, but you don't see foreigners in Israel. Nobody comes to Israel. Partly out of fear from possible renewing of the war with Iran, and partly because Israel is a pariah state. But in both cases, you cannot live like North Korea. Nobody comes to Israel. Even the Jews stopped coming to Israel. Many people carry a lot of traumas from those. Look, it's finally very heavy weapons. We are dealing now with ballistic missiles. 3 of them fall really around my house in Tel Aviv. And I saw the destruction, the fear that it will be renewed. I don't want to compare it to the trauma of the people of Gaza. Uncomparable. But don't underestimate the price of the fear, the price of realizing that we cannot protect ourselves hermetically. And with all the huge army and the Americans and all the weapons, finally we are very fragile.
The social perception is that Israel, with United States, is winning or losing the war against Iran.
Again, I think you know the answer by yourself. You're asking many questions that you know the answer better than I. I mean, it's a joke to think that Israel and the United States won the war against Iran. Iran won, and big time. It's a big victory for the regime, first of all. They stood against the strongest armies in the world, and they didn't break. This will be the narrative for many years now. And this will make this regime much, much stronger and for the long run. And what did Israel and the United States gain? Americans regret it long time ago. Israel don't regret it, unfortunately. But no Israeli believes seriously that Israel gained anything out of it, because we see how strong is Iran, much stronger than before the war. Maybe not militarily, but politically, they are much stronger.
Do you think Netanyahu subestimated Iran?
What did he do? Sorry.
Do you think
Yes.
that Netanyahu subestimated Iran?
I must admit that I don't know what is subestimate, so you have to
He
explain.
doesn't take in serious way.
Underestimate.
Underestimate, sorry, underestimate Iran.
Underestimate. No. I think that we were told for many years that Iran is much more dangerous than it finally was. Same for Hezbollah, by the way, as well. We were told always about the thousands ballistic missiles who will fall on our heads. And finally, it was terrible. But it was not the end of the world. It was not an apocalypse. We were told about apocalyptic scenarios. You don't know what they frightened us for years. And finally, it was hard, difficult, but not an apocalypse. So, on the contrary, I don't know what he thought with himself, but he frightened us against Iran much more than Iran deserves.
You say in the book that the world will have to impose peace on Israel because it will not come from within. What form could that imposition take?
First of all, I'm not sure I use the word peace, because I don't think that you can impose peace. You can impose a settlement, yes, but not peace. Peace must come from the parties. If there is no goodwill, there will be no peace. But you can impose some kind of settlement, obviously. And what I suggest you is very simple. Look how the world imposed regime change in the first apartheid state in history, and use the same methods toward the second apartheid system. And you will see it will work also with the second apartheid system. South Africa is today a more just place, with many problems, but it's a more just place than it was. Israel can become a more just place if the world will wish to turn it into a more just place.
Are you a BDS supporter?
Always was. Yeah, because I believe that only the international community can make a change, can be a game changer. So how do you get it if not through this ugly business of boycotting? Yeah, it is ugly. By the way, many Israelis who don't deserve to suffer from the boycott are suffering from the boycott. But that's the way it goes. I keep on saying, I deserve to be boycotted. I'm Israeli. I live there. I take part with everything, even if I'm standing against it, but I'm part of this concept of being an Israeli. And we all deserve some kind of sanctions, sure.
For many years, you have argued that the only sustainable solution to the conflict would be the creation of a single, democratic, secular, and multi-ethnical state. Is that still your position?
I don't see any other solution. Come on, give me a better solution. I know it's a very hard to get solution, but what else is left? The two-state solution is dead long time ago because the settlers won. Because there are 700,000 violent and very strong politically settlers in the West Bank, which no Israeli politician will be able to evacuate. Without their evacuation, there is no Palestinian state, not a viable state. There can be a Bantustan, but not a viable state. So what is left? We have two options, either apartheid forever or democracy. And my choice is very clear.
And how to build this one-state solution?
First of all, let's say we want it. Most of the Israelis are not even ready to speak about it. Palestinians more. Many more Palestinians, especially in the young generation, are ready to discuss it. Israelis don't even want to hear about it because it means end of Zionism, obviously. Let's start to talk about it. Let's start to have some kind of open minds and open hearts toward it. And then I think we realize that it's much easier because we are living in a one state. It's not that we are living in two separate states. We are living in a one state.
From the river to the sea.
sea, it's one government. The government in Jerusalem decides what a farmer in Jenin will do and what a poor refugee in Gaza will do. He decides, Jerusalem decides about their fate, equally like they decide about my fate. The power, the authority, the government, the army is in Israel, and all state is between the river and the sea. The whole, this entity is under the rule of Israel. So it is one state. The only problem is that it's not a democracy. So what is so complicated or so revolutionary about turning it into a democracy? Why is it so unheard of to speak at least about turning it to a democracy? What is so frightening in turning it into a democracy? It is frightening because for the ruler, the apartheid will be always the first priority. Sure, the life of the ruler, the oppressor, has much better life in an apartheid system rather than in a democracy.
It would be possible for Jews and Palestinians to live together under the same state?
First of all, they live together in the same state. Go to Haifa, go to Jaffa, Jews and Arabs are living together. Go to the Israeli medical centers, to all the hospitals. There is no healthcare in Israel without the Arab doctors and nurses. Doesn't exist. We live together. In very few places, it's working very good. In most of the places, it's not working. But to think that it's impossible, sure it's possible. I can assure you that, with all due respect to you, that any average Israeli and average Palestinian, you will lock them in one room. If they come from the same social class, they will find more common things than me and you. Because you were brought up in a total different society. And we are living and being brought up more or less in the same, under the same umbrella.
I understand. What future in realistic terms do you see for Israel? Do you agree with Ilan Pappé that the Zionist regime is in the beginning of its end?
That's the famous optimism of my friend Ilan Pappé. I think he's too optimistic. I hope he's right, because that's the only way to change. Without it, there will be no change. It will continue. I am still conservative enough to believe that there are not enough powers to make the change, at least not for now. And I don't see the actors changing toward changing the core of it, which is really realizing that Palestinians and Jews are supposed to have equal rights, national rights and personal rights. Most of the Israelis are not ready for this. On the contrary, they are getting more and more distance from it.
Apparently, there is a growing number of Jews inside the United States who are splitting off the Zionism. Is it happening also, or could it happen also in Israel?
Not at all. Not at all. If it would have been happening, I would be more optimistic. Not at all. It is still, it's even not discussed. I mean, those 90% of what we were talking here today is hardly discussed in Israel, in any forum. Not in the media, not in the education system, not in the street, not in the cafes. Those are issues that nobody deals with. Israelis are in a total different place. So I don't see it happening, no.
What's happening in the United States with the Jews in the United States, mainly the youngest Jews, could affect Israel?
Dramatically. Look, those who were demonstrating in all those famous universities will be the next congressmen, the next senators, the next secretary of state. I think that after Trump, it's the end of the special relationship between Israel and the United States. Will it be a Republican administration or a Democratic administration? Those times are over. Israel destroyed it, and in an irreversible way. How fast it will be, how dramatic it will be, it will depend on the next president, but there will be a shift. You really think that the Americans will continue to support and supply Israel with all the money and the weapons and get such a poor outcome, one disappointment after the They failed with everything with Israel. Whatever the United States wanted to happen didn't happen because of Israel. No two-state solution, no solution for Gaza, no achievements in Iran. Nothing was achieved. So you think they will continue and continue? Why?
Do you think it's possible that Israel lose the support of the United States?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
I don't know. It will be the greatest challenge for Israel ever since it was established. In my view, it can endanger Israel much more than an Iranian bomb. On the other hand, it's also a healthy process because the relationship between Israel and the United States were corrupting Israel. With the fact that we can do whatever we want.
Is it possible to the Zionist regime to survive by itself without United States support?
Look, Israel for the short term is a very strong country, economically, technologically. Yes, it is now totally isolated in the world, and that's a problem. I don't see a solution, but maybe this will force Israel to change policy. That's the whole idea, that when Israeli statesmen will realize that we don't have other choice but to listen to the international community. We don't have any choice. Maybe then, because they are not suicidal, I hope, maybe at this point they say, okay, we have no other choice. Let's listen to the international law. Let's listen to the international community.
Like what happened with South Africa?
Like what happened with South Africa. In South Africa, by the way, it was mainly the business community who came to the government and told the government,
it's over.
It's over. We cannot go on like this.
Your earlier books already spoke of the punishment of Gaza, and this one is called The Killing. After more than 40 years writing about the occupation for Israeli readers, what do you still hope to provoke in those who read you in Israel, and what do you hope from those who read your book here in Brazil?
So about Israel, I can tell you that for many years I answered, I don't want to give them the privilege to claim that they didn't know what you mentioned before. You cannot say it. You will never have this privilege to say you didn't know, because here I wrote it and some other colleagues wrote it, and you knew, and you ignored and you denied. So you don't have this luxury of saying I didn't know. And secondly, I have still a small hope that here and there, and this is happening, here and there, mainly among young generations, I get reactions of people who tell me, listen, you made me think. Because the only thing I really want is that the Israelis will start to realize one very, very simple fact, that the Palestinians are equal human beings like us. This is not accepted by most of the Israelis. For the world, it's a much more pretentious goal, because I really believe that we have to mobilize public opinions in the world, which are very critical toward Israel now, to mobilize this political support for the Palestinians into a pressure over the governments, their own governments, and to really create a situation in which Israel will have no other choice but to change its policy and its behavior. So the world right now is much more a bigger goal, because I lost hope about the Israelis. I didn't lose hope about the international community.
I have to finish our interview. I have some questions from our listeners. Let's go here. Some of them. A lot of them. Katia Marquinez, who is a member of our channel. Good morning. I would like to ask my question in advance. Mr. Levy, you served as an advisor to Shimon Peres before becoming a critic of what's happening in Israel. What was the exact moment when the narrative you had defended stopped making sense to you? You have already answered this question.
It, yeah.
Conceição Lima, good morning, Mr. Levy and Breno. In your view, is there a way to change the opinion of the Israeli public regarding the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank? P.S. Congratulations on your outstanding journalism and on your important mission.
So thank you, but I think we answered this as well. I'm not very optimistic about the possibility to change the mindset in Israel. Not now.
Conceição Lima, do you see Hamas as a terrorist organization? I have already answered this question. If so, what other means do you believe Palestinians have to defend themselves?
They don't have any means right now. They tried all the means and they failed. They tried diplomacy. They tried violence. They tried non-violent resistance. They are too weak by themselves. They need support, and they need your support.
Beatriz Pacheco Jordão, how can Israel be stopped, and how can the killing be brought to an end?
I think we answered this as well.
Yes.
By international pressure.
You did. Vera Andrade, I want to ask, is Al-Aqsa in danger of a barbaric destruction?
Yes, definitely. Very big. It can happen any day, and it might not happen, but it's very, very explosive.
Is there any plan about the third temple?
By lunatics, yes. Not by the government, but by lunatics, and they can...
Could happen?
Sure it could happen. Sure it could happen. You go in the West Bank, it's full with flags now. The new flags are not only the Israeli flags, but the flags calling to rebuild the temple. You see it everywhere in the West Bank.
That's time. Do you think the ideas of Amos Oz are still relevant today? Is he still discussed in Israel? And what about Martin Buber? Both of them advocate for dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, didn't they?
I really loved Amos Oz as a friend, as a human being, as a huge writer, but we always knew that we are not in the same place. Because Amos was very, very romantic and very, very optimistic. And he believed, unfortunately, I can't share now this belief that if we only sit down now, few Palestinians, a few Israelis, we'll find a solution. This opportunity we missed. It's now calling for a political decision dictated by the international community. There will be no other solution.
Mr. Levy, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and for this essential conversation.
Thank you so much for having this rare opportunity. I couldn't have this opportunity in Israel to talk to such a depth and to explain my positions, so I'm really grateful for this.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Também agradeço a todas e todos que assistiram a esse episódio, em especial aquelas e aqueles que puderam fazer contribuições financeiras ao nosso site e ao canal de Opera Mundi no YouTube. Sem vocês, nosso trabalho não seria possível e não faria sentido. Um grande abraço a todas e a todos.